What's up, everybody? We are back after a little break, little deserved, necessary break here. But we're back with episode 53, Tales of the Cypher.
Let's go.
With my man SUGY, as usual. What's up, B? How you doing?
Yo, I'm good. Happy to be back. Happy that we're finally launching this episode.
Yes.
It's been a while.
Yes. So this episode, very special one. Episode 53 was actually a 2-hour in-studio special with the man, the one and only Luca, Lazy Legs Patuelli.
Yeah.
We've been wanting to do this for quite some time and been finally able to coordinate it, made it happen. Amazing episode. What did you think?
Very inspiring. And we had a literally like a page full of things we wanted to go through with him, but of course we ran out of time because he's such a good talker. He's a pro at sharing stories, literally. So it was a pleasure to finally have the honor of speaking with the man himself.
Yeah, no, super fun podcast. It was really, it was fun listening to him. He was, like you said, a great speaker. So at one point, it just felt like we were his guests.
Yeah.
And no, he was doing a killer job. And we've learned a lot we've known him for more than 10 years now, but we've learned a lot about him in those stories, a lot of unheard stories, I would
Definitely.
say, not shared.
So if you're actually new to Tales of the Cypher and you're a first-time listener because of you're curious to hear about Luca's story, first of all, welcome to Tales of the Cypher. We are a Montreal-based podcast which comes out every Monday morning. We record shows. We have this rotation where we record shows, one in French, one in English, so we skip every other week. We change languages to adapt to our guests. And so what we do is we record podcasts with people from the scene, from the Quebec, the Canadian scene, and we try to deep dive into each and everyone's specific story and connect that to Montreal and Canada. So for this one, you might be wondering, why is this one on YouTube? So as Emil said, this one's a very special show, special guest. So we thought that this one deserved a studio recording. So we offered this one to you guys on YouTube. But if you want to check out the video versions of our regular podcasts, you can do so at patreon.com/Devs of the Cypher. If you want to consider supporting the podcast, there are various tiers you could decide to sign up for, and that gives you access to early episodes, extra content, as well as the video version of our conversations. But other than that, the show is always free and will always be every Monday morning on all your favorite podcast platforms, such as Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And the show comes out every Monday morning. So if you're new to the podcast, again, thank you so much for deciding to click on this episode, and we truly hope you enjoy the show. If you have some questions, if you want to connect with us, you can do so on Instagram and Facebook when you look up CYPHERSONS. And I think that's it. Emil,
that's it.
Any final words?
No, you killed it.
That's right. Enjoy the show. Peace
out. Luca, Lazy Legs, it's a freaking pleasure to have you, man. We've been trying to coordinate this for such a time.
Yeah.
And now we're making it happen.
Let's go.
It's man, we thought it was like super important to do this fashion. I think at one point we're like, man, how are we going to get this done? Like, how are we going to coordinate? Because we've been talking for 30 plus episodes to make this happen.
It's been this long.
Yeah, it's been a while. You guys forgot about me.
But we're making it happen, man. Really appreciate your time, man.
Thank you. Honestly, I mentioned this to SUGY the other day. I really appreciate and respect these podcasts, especially during these times right now. And this year has been a really tough year for me.
Mm-hmm.
And every week when I would drive Luna to the hospital, I would listen to your podcast. I wouldn't be able to get the full episode or whatever. I would just 15, 20 minutes. And just to hear my friends' voices, it was just honestly, it was refreshing. And so I honestly much respect you guys. This has been awesome. And you guys inspired me to do my own podcast.
Let's go.
So,
yeah, man. We're making things happen.
More breaking podcasts.
Exactly.
Yes,
exactly.
That's awesome.
We of course, it's super important to do this in this setting, but obviously you have, as we're mentioning, such a big profile, big pedigree. You didn't even know you had your own Wikipedia page. So, we wanted to go through all that. We'll go through a bunch of stuff, but just to start, can you introduce yourself for people who don't know who you are? real name, b-boy name.
Yeah, my name is Luca Batwelli. I'm also known as Lazy Legs. I was born in Montreal, raised in Bethesda, Maryland, just a suburb outside of Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And I came back to Montreal when I was 18 years old to pursue my career, or my academic career at Concordia University. And I'm a professional b-boy, but I've been dancing since I was 15 years old. I was introduced to dance in high school. Okay. Very similar story to most b-boys and b-girls that start off. They see a friend doing it, they fall in love with it, they start practicing. For me, when I first started breaking, before I was breaking, I was actually skateboarding. Okay. And so for people that don't know who I am, I was born with a disability called arthrogryposis. It's a neuromuscular disorder. So I use crutches to walk around. And my whole life, I've always used either crutches or wheelchairs or leg braces and walkers. And so I always had to do things differently. And so before dancing, I was skateboarding on my knees. And I had created like my own like skate style where I would have the back of the board where my knees are, and I would paddle with my other hand in front of me. I'd grab the side of the board and I would do like a handstand, and in the handstand I would lift the board up. And so that was like my version of an ollie.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
And then I would do like city skating. And so before breaking, like I had a skate crew, and they were like my best friends. We were neighbors in the neighborhood I grew up, and so one of my best friends lived literally across the street from my house, and the other one lived 4 houses down from me. And then once we went to high school, there was other friends from other schools that came. They were skating too. So we would meet each other on the weekends, and we would just like take over like plazas, like office plazas, and like we would just like skate the crap out of it, and just like grinding curbs and like
in Maryland.
In Bethesda, and that what to me was like, I guess, my exposure to just like, I'd say like street culture in a certain sense, and then after having a surgery on my knees, I could no longer skate anymore. Okay. So part of my condition is basically your joints are extremely stiff, and it's like something that like you can't control. It's part of the way that like. If you guys were ever to have like a really like strong, hard practice, and like your arms are just kind of stiff, and you're trying to extend your arm, you can't extend it.
Right. Okay.
So for me, it was like that for my whole life with my knees. So my knees couldn't extend straight. Okay. And then after having a surgery to correct that, to be able to extend my legs, I couldn't skate anymore because the way that I was skating, like I had like that comfort that like the way that my legs were naturally, it just made sense for me to be on my knees, and it like created a good way for me to like feel like comfortable. And then that surgery really like changed the way I would skate, because the vibrations of the board would open up my scar. The fact that the doctors changed the angle in my legs, my feet started dragging up against the asphalt. So I was like searching for this new activity because skating didn't seem like it was possible anymore. Right.
And at that point, you're probably hooked to the rush of
creating
extreme sports, right? Or just like what it gets you to, like.
There's like the aspect of like creating a trick and like just working really hard at like accomplishing that trick. Like before I stopped skating, I was able to like jump 3 stairs, So then you're like, oh my God, I'm going to try to jump 4 stairs. You know what I mean? Like we would literally take over parking lots, and like, those like when you're parking those cement things to stop the car, we would be able to like lift 2 on top of each other to create like a little angle, and I was doing like board slides and 5-0s and like like I was doing these tricks, and like it was cool. And like this is also pre-cell phone, like so none of this was like filmed or any of that stuff, but it was just a rush, and even just running away from cops, that was like so much fun. You know what I mean? Like those were things that we were doing, when we were 13, 14 years old.
Just like Tony Hawk Pro Skater, just running away from cops.
I have this funny story where I was running away from a cop. We were sitting in front of a Blockbuster, so this was back in the day.
Rest in peace.
We were sitting in front of, and we were loitering. We were just kind of like being, little teenagers, just jerks, what I mean? And we see a cop car drive around, and we're just like not paying attention because it keeps on driving. But then there's another cop, and someone yells, "Cops!" And it was just like the story. Like, have you ever seen the movie Kids? Like when the cops are just no. So it's just literally that same scene where we're all just like, oh shit, and we grab our skateboards and my friends are on rollerblades and we're just like, whoom, whoom, and we've got like 3 cops just running as fast as they can. And I'm on my knees and I'm like, whoom, 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 like pushing as fast as I can. I'm going through like cones and like constructions, like in and out. Like I try to find a way to hide like behind a parking lot, behind the Blockbuster. And I thought I escaped the cop because I look behind me, no one's there. So then I kind of start like turning around the corner. I find like a little alleyway, and my friend who went to my school saw everything that happened from across. He was like shopping with his parents, and he goes, "Yo, Luca, what happened?" So I skate to him, and I'm just explaining to him everything that's happening. And the cop saw me crossing the street, and he just stops me, and he's like, "How would you like it if I take your skateboard?" And I looked at him, I was like, "Well, how am I going to get home?" Because I really had, I didn't have my crutches with me. I would leave my crutches at home. Like it was my mode of transportation. And he didn't believe that I had a disability. Yeah. He was really trying to take my board away. Yeah. And my friend and my friend's dad had to be like, no, like he uses crutches. He's like, needs this. And like, they were like, well, do you have your ID? And I didn't have my ID at the time or anything like that. Yeah. And finally he let us go. But like, that was like, I would say like one of my first experiences of being kind of like badass. Yeah. Like I'm so proud and all of that stuff. Nice. And then after like a year or 2 years later, I ended up having my surgery and I couldn't skate anymore. And some of my friends who were skating had just gotten involved in breaking. Okay. And I had no clue what breaking was. I really like, you know, I had probably seen it, but didn't know what it was like, cool, whatever, you know. I was also like, as a skater, I was more in the punk scene. I was more in like emo and like ska, like, you know, like I was like listening to Sublime all the time. Like really like, that was like my thing. And then so like, people were like, oh, this is hip hop. And I had no clue what hip hop was and all of that stuff, you know. And my friends in high school, they were seniors. So it was Will and Davis. They were like these 2 seniors that were like the popular kids. And they had just gotten involved in breaking, and they were like, you'd be really good at this. Like, and they were showing me what it was. And then they ended up taking me to a jam in Washington, D.C. And this jam was at American University. And it was, the jam was called Breaking for Bernie. It was like a fundraiser. I don't really remember the full details, but I walked in and I saw a Cypher. And I had never seen a Cypher before in my life. And I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. Nice. And I just fell in love right away. Like there was something there. And for those that don't know who my dance style consists of like an upper body strength, you know? So like I'm known for my planches. Like I'm known to be able to lift my legs in the air, but I've been doing that before dancing because again, I've been on my knees my whole life. Like I crawl. Stairs. Jumping stairs. Like, but even to go up and down the stairs, like even to this day when I don't have my crutches, I crawl up and down the stairs. Like that's something I've been doing my whole life. So like to lift myself up, it's kind of been an easier thing. And so that day, I literally crawled into the middle of the Cypher and I just started doing my planche push-ups. Nice. And I didn't know what I was doing. Like I was like, I wasn't dancing. I just was like, oh, well, I can show off, you know? And people were like freaking out because this was in like 2001, 2002. Okay. And at the time, it was 2000, 2001. And at the time, like the planche wasn't like a move that was fully exposed.
Like Junior wasn't hyped yet.
Junior wasn't there, and Cujo was known, but he was known for the West Coast. Right. And so to have someone on the East Coast doing planches and like being different, like it was kind of like a automatic respect that I was getting. Yeah. And when I went back to school that following week, we started a club and we just started practicing every single day. And we were like those kids, like, you know, on the corner of the cafeteria, like we weren't eating our lunch. We were just practicing. In the hallway, we were just practicing. We were like figuring out how to do movements. Then we would go to different school dances, like in all of that stuff. And we would try to meet other dancers and we would find out about people. And then we ended up creating like our scene and our community in like Bethesda and Chevy Chase and like even in DC. Because like Bethesda is like connected to DC. So like the same way like you guys live in Laval, like Montreal, like, you know, you tell people you're from Montreal, you don't tell them you're from Laval. So I tell people I'm from DC because it's literally like that. You know, you could walk to DC from where we're living.
So I feel like you could do this podcast by yourself. Like,
I'm checking off the list, and I'm like, he did that.
I'm so sorry.
it's perfect.
I told you I talk a lot.
No, it's perfect. You exactly jotted down a few questions already. But so before we get into you did like a perfect segue for your breaking part. Before we'll just go into detail for that. We'll just say, you know, Sugy and I. This is hilarious.
Wait, let's actually stop and restart.
Hold up. Okay. But yeah, we'll both just say our first souvenirs.
Oh my god!
Yeah, because that's typically how we start the podcast.
I take over.
I'm just like in my mind, like telling us, like we're like mind talking, like this is too perfect. Like we can't stop this. But,
no, this is awesome.
But yeah, we'll just say like our first souvenirs we have of you, basically, and then we'll jump into that because that was a perfect segue. But yeah, Sugy, do you want to?
Yeah, sure. We just had a reference about Junior, and you schooled us on Cujo because Cujo's probably doing planches way ahead of time, but it just goes to show how 2004, 5-ish my breaking references are. Because when I started, the first thing you type on YouTube is breakdance, and this clip of Junior would pop up. Right?
I know you got so old.
I know you got, yeah, exactly. And believe it or not, a few, I guess, years, or maybe in the same years, if you'd write breakdance Montreal, one of the first things that would pop is your video with RGD2, and then at the end for the credits, I think you have like "My Life Be Like Ooh," and I just watched it again the other night, and I'm like, man, this has to be one of the first breaking thing I've seen in my life. Like watching this video was so mind opening because. Here I was, like I was living in the suburbs, like closer to where you are right now in Belleuil, and we were exposed to some breaking, but not so much. And the way that we were brought up, like Montreal felt like it was like far away, and we were only exposed to what was surrounded like by us, right? So. Like you were the first recollection of what Montreal has to offer, and it was you. So I was like, "Shit, this is wild. Like this is how crazy breaking can become. You know, like this is it. It really is for everybody and anybody. So you're probably one of the first person in Montreal I thought of it this week as looking forward for this conversation. I thought about it, and I was like, man, he's probably one of the first guy I've seen break in my whole life. So. And something I guess I wanted to plug at some point in the conversation, but like I remember having a practice, it has to be like years ago, with you and Zig and a few other people at Rebelle et Vagabond, and I think you were just navigating, like practicing some 6 steps, like actual 6 steps, and I remember having like a kind of like an emotional moment on my way back home because I was like. Man, here I am sometimes like finding myself finding excuses or just like, oh, I'm too tired to do this, or I'm like, I can't do that because I'm like, and all that. And I'm like, this guy was practicing freaking 6 steps. and I just think I've said this to you like several times, but you're an inspiration, my friend. Like you're crazy for so many reasons. You're an amazing person. And so I'm very happy to have you here, and voila. So that's my first / best memories of Luca. What about you, man?
My first one, and this was like legitimately my first one. I don't know if you remember this, but so I started breaking in 2009, and I started taking class at Baseline in Brossard. Remember Baseline Studios?
Yeah.
So Vicious was my first teacher. Then at one point it was T-Rex, but during the time when it was still Vicious. I think Vicious was just like super excited, and he's like, I gotta show these guys something. And I think he's like, oh, let me bring in Lazy Legs, you know? And you were like the guest, teacher for that class. And yeah, you came in, it was, me and a few other guys I remember, and we're just like, well, who's this guy? And I remember I already saw something of you before. And that was like my first months of breaking. And, I was like, oh, snap, it's him. And then it's like you starting to show your moves and stuff, and I was just like, that was my first memory. And you not only showed your breaking, but you gave like you always do, you gave a nice speech, and like I think No Excuses, No Limits already existed, like that slogan or that saying?
If it was 2009, like I think I was probably starting it, but I think I was publicizing it in like 2010.
Yeah.
But I probably was already saying it by then.
But I mean, you were already inspiring us then at that class. That was my first recollection, and I was like looking at. I remember that video, you know, the "My Life Be Like" that one. But yeah, man, it was just super dope to see. You know, just your story, obviously, but yeah, man, that was the first recollection, and I'm always gonna remember that. You know, I don't know what you call that move, but like that move where you just throw yourself in the air, you throw your crutches, and you just land on your hands.
Yeah,
I'm always gonna remember that and how you showed that. But yeah, man, that was like my first recollection. You come into baseline and showing us like how to break and that little story.
I have to say too, like I have like so many people mentioning to me, because like we're from the South Shore again, as I said, and I teach a lot of kids on the South Shore, and you do a lot of school tours, I believe, right?
Yeah.
So I've had over the years, it happens at least twice a year. One of my kids comes to me and he's like, "There's this guy at school today," like, or "I saw this guy like at school," like, or just Kevin from our Crew Magic and Flow Gap. I think they had you at their school when they were growing up, and they like if they were here, they would probably be able to be like, "Oh, this is my first memory of you." So it's crazy how much traction this thing has on the whole world, man. Because like everyone, I feel like everyone has seen Lazy Legs, you know, like this is where it's this is how crazy it has become. But I think we're lucky to have such a rich history in Montreal, but we have also like very rich and passionate individuals that create what Montreal is, right? So
Montreal is such a special place.
It is,
honestly,
man.
Like I'm so thankful that like my family and I moved here. Yeah. Like I don't think I would be who I am today if I stayed in Maryland. You know what I mean? I think like life would be completely different. And like, I honestly like the fact that we have the two languages, French and English, that in itself creates a really unique culture. Yeah. And then within the two languages, you have your own communities, you know, and then like when they merge, there's this beautiful synergy that like, you know, and anyone that comes from around the world to Montreal for an event, all they have to say is just positive things about Montreal. And I remember specifically, actually, I have two stories for you guys, actually. But before I get into that, but I just want to talk about Montreal real quick, is that growing up in the States, like where I grew up in Maryland, there was a division between Maryland, DC, and Virginia. So if you're from Maryland, you don't really click with the DC or the Virginia dancers. And if you're from Virginia, you don't click with the DC and Maryland dancers. It really was kind of like, you know, obviously you had your individual dancers that like floated around and could do that. But if you're a crew from like Virginia, if you were part of 703 crew, you don't mess with anyone else. Like it really was like a division. So when you would go to a practice in other locations with other dancers, you really felt like a competition, and it wasn't like a family. When I came to Montreal, and what I really love and appreciate in Montreal is that no matter who you are, no matter what level of dance and experience and what crew you are, you walk into a practice, you say hi to everyone, and you give everyone a high five.
That's crazy.
And that in itself just shows the respect that and there's something so special that you don't have in other places around the world. You know, like before ILLMASK, and we'll get into that later, but like ILLMATIC and REMASK, we were rivals. Like ILLMATIC in Area 51, we were rivals. But then we'd be at Tokyo Bar later that night and just partying the crap, and we'd be like, you know, like wasted all together. You know what I mean? And then we'd go to a practice or we'd go into an event. And we're like, oh, I hate you. But then we're like, hey, let's go have a beer together. You know what I mean? Like, where I don't feel like in other places around the world you have that same like energy.
Yeah, you know, it's a healthy mix, you know?
It really is.
And like you say what's up to everybody in the practice, but then at jams, it's like, I don't mess with you. I don't like, this is my crew, this is your crew. Like it's a good mix of that, you know?
Yeah. But my two stories for you guys.
I was like, where's this going?
My two stories. SUGY, I remember, I think we had met before, but I'd say the clearest memory I have of you, and I feel embarrassed and I'm apologizing for this, is I was hosting Octo's King of the Ring event, or like the
Rhythm in the Ring,
something like that. I forget the name, but it was at TriStar.
Yes. Yeah.
And I couldn't read the handwriting on the list, and I kept on calling you SUGY. And I'm like, is SUGY here? And no one was coming up on the stage. And I'm like, is SUGY here?
That's the story of my life.
And then someone's like, SUGY. I'm like, yeah, sure, SUGY.
Oh my God.
And I felt so bad because I could feel like you were angry with me at that moment.
No, yes and no. Like,
No,
there's been worst moments, but oh man, this is funny. That's the story of my life. Don't feel bad. It's okay. It feels like it's my bad because I think that the way that I'm spelling it in English reads SUGY.
Yeah,
right?
I think so.
But in French, you could say SUGY, whatever.
Yeah.
So I made the mistake of choosing the way that I spell my name. So it's okay. Don't feel bad. That's very funny. That's the story of my life. Yeah.
But I just remember that I have that. But I mean, I remember practicing with you, and then CYPHERSONS in general. I don't think there's been one event in Montreal where we haven't been in a qualifier against each other.
Yo, I was going to say that.
I think that like we've always meet each other, and then we end up like qualifying, but then we don't meet each other. Like, or sometimes we do, but there's always like a moment, and I love battling against you guys, honestly, because it's positive energy, and we're both giving ourselves 100%, but we're encouraging each other. Like that's for me, like what I really love. Battle
often.
I think the actual last time we battled, it was a crew versus crew at Under Pressure. And there was no qualifying. You guys took that battle, but it was you.
Oh yeah, the 2016 one.
Exactly.
Oh my God. We got spanked.
That was like one of the last battles where we had like a good lineup, you know, and there was you guys. You had your good lineup too, you know.
I think it was ILLMASK. It was like one of the last times ILLMASK. Well, no. Like we did it this summer, but it was just more like for fun. But that was the last, I think, we actually had practice for it and everything.
Yeah.
My memory for you, and I don't know if it's gonna be funny, but we went to Ottawa for Canada Day, and you were you had just become like Zig student, or you were just like I think transitioning from baseline, which actually I appreciate that you mentioned baseline real quick, because when Crypto was teaching like Sweet Technique, Crypto actually took on a contract, and I actually taught for like 3 months, so I took over Crypto's contract.
Okay.
And so I like to take a little pride of knowing that I had a little hint in that. But it was cool because then that's when Vicious and I connected, and like he brought me, and I actually do remember coming to visit. But I remember like shortly after, I think it was 2010, you went to Ottawa.
Yeah.
And like you stayed with Zig.
Yeah.
And he was judging, and I was hosting the event, and you woke up, you're like, Zig sleeps naked. Like that. And your face was just white when you shared it.
It was like my first years in breaking. I'm like, what the fuck?
Oh my God, this is good. Wow.
And I remember like I think we were all having breakfast together, and you were just kind of like shocked. And I love Zig because he's so like, je m'en fous, like, you know what I mean? Like just that mentality and everything. And so for me, like that's my memory of you.
That's awesome. That's amazing. I remember that. Yeah, that was a great memory. Like maybe not that moment specifically, but it was a great memory. Yeah, that's Zig and I went together actually. Yeah, just me and him. That was cool. Yeah, man.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you for doing that, because no one else does it. So for the next guest,
step your game up.
Let's bring this conversation back to you, of course. So you mentioned you've already kind of like built your little team of breaking friends up in Washington, but if the timeline follows correctly, you're just about to come to Montreal. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I was 17 years old. Like, so in Maryland, like we had our crew, we were called Chopsticks Posse.
Let's go.
And the reason was because we would always go to like an Asian restaurant right after practice. And so we had chopsticks all the time with us. That was like our crew. And at the time, there was another crew called Fusion Force. And Fusion Force was like the big crew. They had won the battle before. And they were just recruiting members all the time. And they came up to me and they tried to recruit me. Or they did recruit me. But have you guys seen the movie Mighty Ducks? So it's kind of like that Mighty Ducks story where like I went for that better team, but not realizing that the team that I had behind me was the better team. You know what I mean? And it was kind of that story where I joined this crew thinking, okay, I'm going to join this crew to win, you know, and I thought that was what I had to do. And there was a battle. It was called Breakers Delight. Breakers Delight in Maryland was the one event that brought like all three, like it really brought the whole East Coast actually together, because people from New York, Philadelphia, even like Florida would come to this event. It was a $1,000 prize, you know, early $1,000 prize. You're just like, this is huge, you know? Yeah. And it was like full crew battles. And Cujo was a judge. Okay. And I still didn't know who Cujo was. But I already had my UFOs, I already had my planches, and I was already creating combinations. And everyone's like, yo, Cujo, you got to battle him. And I was like, really? Who's this guy? You know, and like someone showed me a video. I'm like, cool, I can smoke him. That was like, you know what I mean? Like, I was 17 at the time, very immature, still didn't know what breaking truly was. You know, I was just doing it because it felt good, and I was still like figuring it out. I'm part of this crew of Fusion Force. I'm like, we're gonna win. I'm gonna meet this guy Cujo, and I'm gonna battle him.
I'm gonna smoke him.
And I'm at this event, and I remember January 16th, 2002. I do a throwdown. Everyone like goes crazy. Cujo shows up in the Cypher. I'm like, hi, are you Cujo? Do you want to battle? Like that. And he looks at me, he's like, nah, kid.
So naive. I love this.
And he actually had broken his wrist, and so he couldn't battle me. But he like gave me props and everything like that, and like would give me like kind of like pointers, and we actually like connected there. And at the time, I didn't know he was deaf, and it was just kind of like cool, like, you know. And then at that event, before battling with Fusion Force, this would have been my first battle with Fusion Force and this new crew that we're supposed to win and all this type of stuff. I'm in the sidelines on the Cypher, and I do a move and I break my leg.
Oh, like actually break your leg?
Like my left leg was completely upside down. Oh. And it's like it's like one of those, you know, like, you see it in like a YouTube video, like, you know, that like when the wrestler like jumps and like breaks
you don't want this to happen. No.
and so I'm in that Cypher. I'm just lying on the floor. I look, my leg is like flopped over.
Oh my God.
And I'm in this extreme pain, but I'm not recognizing. I think I'm in shock, and I don't think that my leg is broken, and I'm trying to get up, and I feel like I can't lift myself up. Like I'm just like, there's something holding me down. I'm like, like that. And I just start crying like crazy, like, you know, and the organizers like rush, they turn off the speaker, because I was right next to the speaker. They move everyone out like of my area, and like the ambulance comes and scoops me up. The ambulance takes me to a general hospital. The general hospital has no clue what arthrogryposis is. And I'm 17 at the time, and like, the way also like the hospitals work in the States is that your insurance has to clear before they can even move you forward. Like, so I'm in the waiting room, and they're trying to clear my insurance, and they're calling my parents. My parents are like rushing over. My brother was with me at that jam, and my brother like knew my leg was bad, but he was trying to make me feel better. He was like, yo, so don't worry, we're gonna rent some video games after, we'll have fun, and you know, like
we'll go back to the gym.
Yeah. Basically, he was trying to make me feel better. That was happening. And then like the hospital, I guess, didn't communicate properly, but they were ready to do like an emergency surgery. And so like I'm getting like IV pushed into me and all this type of stuff. And my parents, like it feels like a scene in the movie. My parents just run in, and they put their hand on the doctor saying, do you know what you're doing? And the doctor is like, well, I read about it once in a book. And they're like right away, they're like, no, you're not touching my son. We're gonna call the other hospital. And so I in Maryland, there's another state called Delaware. Yeah. And so I would get treated at a hospital that specialized for arthrogryposis in Delaware, and it was a 2-hour drive. And my parents called the hospital. They make the arrangements, and basically the hospital that I was at in Maryland, like, released us. But it was like really like in a negative way. Like the doctor, like not the doctor, but like the nurse just kind of just like throws me on the wheelchair and like wheels me out. They're like, fine, you don't want our care anymore. Like, because they wanted that paycheck, you know, like that's the way it kind of works over there. And in Maryland, it rarely ever snows. That night.
Oh, no way.
It was like the blizzard of the year. It was like Snowmageddon.
Wow.
And my parents, we had a Jeep Cherokee at the time, and they take the seats down. They put all the pillows like in the back, and I'm just like literally like sleeping like with one leg up like this, and on the car ride like with pillows all over me. And they drive 2 hours. It actually was probably even 3 hours because of the snow. Like I fell asleep and I just wake up and it's like 5 a.m. The stretcher comes and picks me up from the car, brings me to the hospital. And I ended up having like an immediate surgery where they puzzled my bones back together. Oh. And so because of my condition, my bones were actually softer than your bones. Yeah. And so they couldn't, the average surgery, they would put like needles and like all this type of stuff to bring the bones back together. For me, like the doctor had to kind of like really like massage the bones back. Then they put me in a full body cast. And so I was in a full body cast. Well, I could move my arms, but the cast was up to here, like up to the top of my chest. And I'm lying flat for, it was like 2.5 months.
No way.
And this was my senior year of high school. And I ended up missing, it was from January all the way up until June. I didn't go back to school. And so I was getting homeschooled during the whole time. And, you know, like you're in high school as a senior, you want to, especially your senior year, you want to party. You know, you're hearing all of this type of stuff, you know. And I'd say that I was very fortunate to have my 2 best friends living so close to me because we had like an open door policy and my parents were always cool with it too, that after school, these kids would just come over, my best friends, Brian and Jed and another friend, Dan, and they would just always come over and we would play video games. And if they went to parties, you know, they would go to the parties, but then they would come back and sleep over and stuff like that, cool. You know. And I'd say that helped me recover a lot quicker during that surgery. But when I got my cast off, I didn't know if I wanted to dance again because I was so scared and my parents were so pissed at me because I had gone through 16 surgeries prior to that to try to correct my situation that they're like, why would you go ahead and put yourself back
at risk
to hurt yourself, you know? And there was something kind of like crawling inside of me that like I was missing it, you know? Yes. And that summer, I ended up graduating school. I actually got to do the graduation and walk across the stage, like or crutch across the stage and everything. And no one had seen me either because like I had like and so it was like a big like celebration and people were happy and all that stuff. But then I ended up moving to Montreal. And I moved to Montreal because my parents like they closed down their business and I was born here. They already had a house, and so it just kind of made sense for my parents to come.
Okay, there was already a connection.
The papers and all that stuff. You're still Canadian.
Yeah, I'm a dual citizen, so it was possible for us to come back. And I also didn't get accepted to any university in the States, but I had gotten accepted to Concordia. Okay. So I just followed my parents up. But I also had no clue what I was going to do. Like, you know, you're 18 at the time. You're just curious. You know, what are you going to do? And that summer, I was researching breakdance Montreal everywhere, you know? And this was when Google was still like goggles, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't, you know? And
then you found your video.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, time travel. Yeah. And there was a website called hilariousworld.com.
Okay.
And there's a b-boy named Hyper who's part of like the Red Mask family. Okay. And he ran this website and it was motorcycles and breakdance. Nice. And I was also into street racing. I was actually into that like Need for Speed, like, you know, and
you're such an adrenaline junkie.
Let's go. For real, man. Like, did you guys know about like Orange Julep and like the things like with the car shows and stuff like that? Yeah. So I used to go to those, like, you know, so even before breaking, I was going to those, like before in Montreal, that was like the first weekend I went to, because he's not a real cousin, but Italians, you know, if you grew up with someone, they become your cousin, even though you're not your cousin and that type of stuff. So I had this cousin named Alessandro who was like a street racer. He had like a Honda Civic, lowered it, big muffler, all that. Let's go. So he was taking me around in Montreal at the time. This was before I understood, like, I met the B-boys and all that stuff. And so we were going to Orange Julep, and then we were driving to Pierrefonds, and there was like a racing track and all that type of stuff.
Nice.
And then...
So what year is that, sorry?
This was 2002, July 2002. Okay. And then I go on this website, Hilarious World. I meet this guy named Hyper just off email. I still, to be honest, I think I only met him once, even to this day. I have no clue who he is, but like Dingo and all the Red Mask guys, like, yo, Hyper, they all have stories about them. And he tells me about a practice in Saint Michel at Saint Michel CJEP, and I end up going, and Shiloh from Red Mask is there, and a couple other guys, and it was just like a practice, and it was the first time that like I danced from the day that I broke my leg, and then I found out about Under Pressure, and then I go to Under Pressure, and that too was the first time that I compete from the day that I broke my leg, and I competed like I was just ciphering, and then the competition like the signups show up, and Skywalker is like collecting the names, and I'm like, hi, I'm new, and I don't know if I want to battle. And Sky was like, why not? I was like, well, cause I'm new here. And he's like, what's your name? Lazy Legs. And he just puts my name down. Nice. Like, I have no, you know what I mean? Perfect. And I end up doing the battle. I think I ended up making in the top 4. And nice. We did a 4-way battle. It was like Cleopatra, Prototype, and someone else. And I didn't end up winning, but because I was in the top 4, I automatically qualified in War is War at the SAT. And my parents were still not understanding what was going on. I was kind of doing this like behind the scenes. But they knew that I was like interested in this. And so they encouraged me, but my Italian parents are very overprotective, you know? So I think I had just gotten a cell phone, and my parents were like, call me every hour, you know, like if you go to the hospital, like, you know, we'll meet you there, like type of thing. They were expecting me to like break my leg again, you know? And so like, and basically after War is War, I think that's when my like recognition in Montreal started like becoming a bit more like apparent. And I started meeting other dancers. And then from that practice at the Saint Michel CJEP, I ended up finding about the Dawson practices, and I was practicing with Area 51 and Toy Soldiers.
Toy Soldiers, we've never heard. Have we heard of that?
I think maybe once in like all our 50-some episodes. So
So there were some guys from Area 51 that were part of Toy Soldiers, and Toy Soldiers was more like a fun crew, and it was kind of like it was just more of a fun crew. And I think there was even some guys from 701 that were part of it. And don't quote me on that. I might be a bit wrong. But it was just kind of this kind of like fun crew. And then there was a guy named Logo. So I don't know if anyone talked to you guys about Logo.
Man, this is awesome. We're still unfolding stuff.
And if I'm going too far, too wide, I'm sorry. But Logo was one of the B-boys who literally could do any single combination in a movement at a practice, and he would kill it.
Wow.
But then the minute you would do it in a show or in a battle, he would crash. But Logo and I became really good friends because he was also into street racing also. And so he and I would go to Julep together. Then we would go practice all the time. And like, it was just like Logo and I were really chill. And then he was chill with Tiger. And so Logo, Tiger, and then there was another guy named Anthony, who was also known as Phototech, who wasn't a B-boy, but liked taking pictures. And he was that guy that just shows up to practice, tries to do a windmill, does it once, and then he just pulls out his camera and just like starts doing those things. Nice. But the 4 of us who actually became a crew, and we called ourselves Soul Expressions. Okay. And
was System in that for a second or two?
Well, so Soul Expressions, so System ended up moving to Montreal. I think it was like 2005-ish, 2004, 2005.
Yeah, something like that.
We just recorded with him. We should know that.
And so System was going to Concordia. And at that same time, I had started the Concordia Breakdance Club. Okay. And so Logo, Tiger, they were always at Concordia. They weren't studying there, but they were practicing with me because I ended up creating a practice spot. And so System and this other guy named Russell started practicing with us. And so Reflex Foundation and Soul Expressions, we were kind of just combined. And so sometimes we would compete as Soul Expressions and sometimes we'd compete as Reflex Foundation. Okay. So I was indirectly a member of Reflex Foundation, and vice versa. And so we were just kind of connected. And then Logo ended up joining ILLMATIC. And that summer, when Logo joined ILLMATIC, I was going to France, and basically it was a summer of 2003, and I went to, so I had like a family friend who actually became like one of my best friends. His name's Raphael, who's not a b-boy at all.
Okay.
Like the total opposite, but then you chill with them and you're like, yo, this guy's cool, you know? And he's French from France, and he tells me about this thing called Les Fêtes de Bayonne. And it's basically in this town in the south of France in the Pyrenees called Bayonne. And it's where everyone wears those white shirts with the red foulard. Okay. And they transform for 5 nights straight. They close the whole city down, and it's just pure like party. Okay. And he's like, oh, tu dois venir en France, puis tu vas venir aux fêtes de Bayonne. Da, 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 da. Yeah. I had just turned 21 at the time. I wasn't partying that hard, and I had so I had the option because that summer or the summer before I left Washington, I got in a pretty bad car accident with my friend. And my friend's insurance basically paid me off. They gave me like a $2,000 check. And at the time, when I got, it was the most money I had ever seen in my life. And it was like, I was in the whole street racing game, and I was getting ready to buy some rims for my car. But then my friend Raphael is offering me this opportunity to go to France. So I'm like, do I put the $2,000 on this trip to France or
the rims?
And I went to France instead. Yes, okay. Yeah, you made it. and it was the best decision of my life. It was like one of the best decisions of my life. And it was so much fun. I ended up partying. I ended up actually even breaking in France. And like I was like in the streets like, like crazy, like shit, you know? And then, but while I'm there, Logo joins ILLMATIC. Okay. And I'm kind of like jealous at that time. And like Logo's like, yeah, by the way, I'm still Soul Expressions, but I'm ILLMATIC too. And I'm like, well, I want to be ILLMATIC too, you know? Because at the time, ILLMATIC was like the most organized crew in Montreal. Okay. And they were doing all the stage shows. They had business cards. They had a website. They had all this type of stuff. And I was already kind of in that like avenue, getting there, but I wanted to be part of ILLMATIC to kind of join that. Yeah. But I also didn't want to have that same mistake that I did with Fusion Force. So when I came back to Montreal, I was like, hey, Logo, can you get me to come practice with the guys so I can get to know them? Yeah. And I spent all of 2003 before officially joining ILLMATIC just practicing with the guys. And we became like an amazing group of friends. And that was what was more important to me, was knowing that I had a group of friends that would be there behind me in case anything happened. Because I forgot to mention that after I broke my leg with Fusion Force, like at that event, Fusion Force never called me. They never checked in on me. Oh, wow. And Chopsticks Posse were calling me all the time, and they were checking in on me. So like, I had this fear that if something happened to me, if I joined ILLMATIC and they're the better crew, they're all this type of stuff, but if they're not going to have my back when I need them, then I don't want to be a part of them, you know? And after spending that year with them and really getting to vibe with them, like it was like an easy choice, and I joined ILLMATIC. It was summer of 2004.
Wow. And then you guys became the best of friends.
We friends forever. I think we actually made a joke crew when we ended up doing a battle, and we were calling ourselves Fantastic Friends or something like that. Or something like that.
Is there a way for you to help us understand what was the dynamic within the crew at that time? Because like it's a recurrent kind of like thing that comes on the podcast when people talk about ILLMATIC, that you guys were, of course, the organized crew, like the Backstreet Boys from the West, but that you guys were also dominating and just like being very strong in the scene. So how would you describe the energy in the crew, and like what made ILLMATIC such a successful group at the time?
I think as ILLMATIC, we learned early on that like the way to improve and advance is really getting yourself out there and traveling. Yeah. And so like we really made it that effort, like even early on, to go to New York, to go to Toronto, to go to Ottawa, and experiment and test with like all of our strengths. You know, like I think Shook and City I would definitely say that they were more like the leaders of the crew.
Okay.
But everyone kind of led the crew in different avenues. You know, I'd say that Shook was that more organized networking guy that could help make opportunities happen and sell the crew. City was more like that creative guy that would like kind of wake up like at night and be like, hey, I have this idea. Let's try it out, you know. But then like you had like Mark Decoy, who would be like the musical guy that would really kind of just like, or that technical guy that would be like, bringing things together too in a certain way. And then you had Dave and Andrew Lawn, who are not who were less active from the beginning, who also kind of like were our coaches in a certain way.
Okay.
Where like they would be at practice and they wouldn't be afraid to be like, yo, that wasn't good enough, do it again. You know, and then you had Flakes in our crew, who was, again, he was kind of like that logo who would hit every move, and then he would actually be able to perform it for the most part. But he was also kind of like that badass in the crew. So if you're calling us like the Backstreet Boys, you know, he was the one that would show up to practice when he wanted to show up to practice, or you know what I mean, like. But he was always committed. He was kind of like your Dennis Rodman in a certain way, and never to that extreme, never. But kind of like that guy where like wouldn't practice as hard as we were practicing,
and hit his moves.
But he would hit his moves. Yeah. But then we learned early, like later on, that he was actually practicing at home. Like he, you know, he was, so like he was doing it to prove us, and he just kind of just show up and like barely warm up and like hit this crazy combination.
I met him in Halifax in 2011. Like he was judging hopscotch when I was there. He was a great guy. Yeah, man. We partied our fair share. Like he was good.
Well, that was that was the other thing that ILLMATIC was known for, was partying. Nice. You know, and I think that, you know, I was still in university at the time. I was young, and all I wanted to do, like, we had a joke within ILLMATIC was that, like, in order to join ILLMATIC, you had to put hair gel on. And at the time, I used to have like super long hair, and I was like pimples all over my face. I love it. And basically, like, I joined the crew, and like Shook shows up with a bottle of hair gel, and he's like, do it. And I do it, and then I cut my hair, and like, you know, like it's like a whole total change. And then like we end up like, you know, there was a thing like Cheers Wednesday, downtown Montreal.
Okay, let's go.
And it was like $2 drinks or something like that. And we were there every Wednesday, like just doing like partying, you know. Yeah. And then also Area 51 was partying with us. So just to, like, even though we had a rivalry against Area 51, we were partying with those guys, you know, every Wednesday. We were always together and everything like that. And so, yeah, there was just this really strong, I'd say, brotherhood between the guys. But I also joined at a time when the crew slowly started having less interest in breaking. So in 2004, we were active 2004, 2005, 2006. But it went from like, I would say it was going more in like a downhill aspect of things where less and less members were being less passionate with what they were doing. And in 2005, I had the idea to create an all-star team to go to City versus City.
Okay, so you're behind that.
Yeah, nice. So like I'm behind it, but without Dingo and Octo, I don't think it would have happened. Okay. Honestly, like, so I was studying at Concordia, I was studying marketing, and I was like, cool, how can I put everything that I've learned from school to create like a team and manage it to go and like find sponsors and take us to this event, you know? I had already gone to Freestyle Session. I was also already at Red Bull Beat Riders in 2004. Yes. So those kind of opened up networks for me, and I was getting to know dancers from a little bit all over the world. And so like Check It from City versus City was like, yo, like, you guys should come, like, because I had met him already. I went to Ashes to Ashes, like, in Portland. Like, so I was already in that circuit, in the international circuit. And I was like, well, Montreal is dope. Like, people don't know us. I was like, I really want people to know Montreal. Yeah. And so initially the crew was myself, Shook, City, and Flakes. Okay. And then Rocket and Dingo. And then there was Zig and Dr. Step. And then there was Prototype and Asian. Zig and Dr. Step didn't feel comfortable joining the crew because they didn't want to be part of a super crew. They wanted to be like a flow rock thing. Okay. And at the time, they didn't vibe with us. So then Skywalker and Speedy ended up joining.
Okay.
What a team.
And I had organized with my Concordia Breakdance Club that we had a space, like it was like Tuesdays and Thursdays. I had gotten Donini Pizza to sponsor us. So every single practice we had free food.
Nice.
And then I was like looking for like financial sponsors. And that's where I would say Dingo and Octo stepped up their game. And they're like, well, why don't we just do a fundraiser at Tokyo Bar? Because Dingo and Octo were kind of like indirect promoters, or they knew the people at Tokyo. And I was like, cool. Like, I had no clue like how it was going to work. And we ended up throwing a jam at that event to celebrate like our crew. And I think we raised about like $3,000 or $4,000, which allowed us to rent 2 minivans. And then we drove all the way, and we had like 3 hotel rooms, and we were all like together, and that helped form ILLMASK, because I would say the most organized out of all of us in the 10 crew was the ILLMATIC and the Red Mask guys.
Okay.
And so like City and Octo and Dingo were like, and Shook, they were all like vibing really well. And I was kind of coordinating all of that stuff in terms of the organization to make sure that we would get to Chicago and all of that. And we ended up having such an amazing trip, because at the time, some of the guys had never traveled before. You know, Rocket had never left, like had never been into the States, you know, like to break, you know, Prototype had never traveled outside of Montreal. So it was just this like exciting experience. And like, even going through the border, we didn't know if we were going to cut the border. And like, I think Rocket didn't have his passport, or he had just gotten a fresh passport. Like, it was like just for that trip, you know what I mean? Like, and Azian had been arrested like a year before. And like, you know, Azian, he's a jokester, right? Like, and we're at the border. And also ILLMATIC too, they stop at like duty free and buy like gallons and gallons of alcohol for the trip. And I'm just like, oh man, how are we gonna pass the border? How are we gonna do all this stuff? And then the border agent asks like us in the car, it's like, oh, has anyone been arrested? And like Azian's like just joking, oh, me.
Oh my God.
And I'm like shitting my pants this whole time. And he's like, I have for fighting. And he's like doing these things.
So French, Gab. Like it's so him. That's amazing.
And then but we crossed the border like nothing happened.
Wow.
Like, this was awesome.
Wow.
We get to Chicago, and we ended up qualifying, and we made the top 8. We beat out, I think we beat out the Chicago team, but then we lost to Texas.
Okay.
Wow.
And Texas was a mix of Havoc Horo and Jive Turkeys, and they were called Texas Gold. And it was basically like Marlon, Omar, like all the heavy
Texas
hitters at that
village.
time, you know, anyone from Texas at that time, you know.
It was hot.
But what I remember so well about that trip was that we spent the day in Chicago after the battles just to like visit, and we were just having fun. And I was giving my crutches to Azian and Speedy just to mess around, because Speedy was a jokester too. Like, Speedy was like, you know, just as much as Azian. And we would go around doing stupid stuff, like pointing in the sky and going, oh shit, like that, you know what I mean? And like see if people would run away. And like, and then like, I think it was Speedy who grabs my crutches, and he's walking and he pretends to fall, and just to get people's reaction, like in the city, you know?
Yeah.
And there was a cop that stopped us. And this brought me back to my skating days.
Nice.
To be like, yes, yo, it was so much fun. And this cop stops us, and we're like getting grilled for like loitering and joking and doing all this type of stuff. And everyone just pulls out their French card, and we're like, on comprend pas?
Amazing.
C'est quoi? You know, and like the cop was getting so frustrated that he just let us go.
Amazing.
Wow, man.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So the whole ILLMASK thing obviously started off like probably the following months and years after that trip.
Yeah, so I want to clarify one thing about
Let's go.
that from everyone in ILLMASK, and the guys seem to forget this one. Yes, ILLMASK, I'd say the main core of the ILLMASK was that one trip in New York. I'd say that helped solidify it. But the actual first time ILLMASK performed publicly was a month after City versus City.
Okay.
And so we had an opportunity to go to Harborfront in Toronto.
Okay.
And on that car ride, like we called the guys from Red Mask and we're like, hey, we're going to go Harborfront. Do you guys want to come with us? And they're like, yeah, sure. And so we just vibed out. And on the car ride, we're like, what are we going to call ourselves? Redmatic? Or is it going to be ILLMASK, Red Mask? Da, da, da. And then just someone blurted out ILLMASK. And you're like, yo, that's chill. Yeah. And that was the creation of the name. And on that trip, it was myself, City, Shook, Flakes, and Fluid. And then Dingo, Rocket, Bambino, and Octo.
Okay.
And we won that event.
Oh, wow.
And we killed it. And it was just so much fun. And so the guys forget that trip. That was the creation of ILLMASK. Because we were still doing separate stuff after that. ILLMATIC was still doing their things. ILLMATIC did America's Got Talent.
Yeah.
Red Mask was still doing their stuff, you know. But that was, I'd say, the creation of ILLMASK.
Interesting.
And then after that, the guys Shook and City and Octo, Dingo, and Rocket went to New York. And that was, like, I'd say the more official, like, bringing everyone together, being like, okay, let's make this a real thing.
Yeah.
And the original vision behind ILLMASK was a bit like Havoc Oro. So Havoc Oro in Texas, they were two different crews. You had Havoc and Oro. Yeah. And so, like, just that fusion. And so when we created ILLMASK, it was really like, let's be that Havoc Oro of Canada. You know what I mean? Like we felt like Rocket was the Roxrite of Canada. You know what I mean? The general, the guy that never crashed. You know what I mean? Like City was the machine of Canada. You know what I mean? Like there was like we looked up to those movements. Do you know what I mean? And in that aspect of things, and we were training hard to do like B-Boy Unit and get ourselves out there.
Those are great comparisons, actually.
Yeah, man.
So you mentioned America's Got Talent. You know, we know you did multiple stuff. You did America's Got Talent, like So You Think You Can Dance. You even been on Ellen and all these big shows. Vancouver, actually, with the Paralympics. That must have been really cool.
Yeah.
How was it? It seems like you're already getting adapted to that big stage pretty quickly, but like, how was it going on these big shows? And then obviously, like, just yourself individually going to shows like Ellen. How was that? You know, and what was your big break you find going on to these shows?
My big break actually was from that video that you guys saw.
Okay.
So I was already getting myself out there, and before that video, I had another video, and I don't know if you guys ever saw it.
I might have seen it, yeah.
So in breaking, so it started off with the quote from the movie Gladiator, and it says, I'm trying to think how, like, it's gonna come back to me, but it says.
What's that famous quote? Hold on.
It goes, to be the best, you don't have to win your crowd, win your freedom. Okay. And I felt like I started off with that, and then you see me doing a planche on a Pilates ball, and then I fly off a Pilates ball. Like that was like the video. Okay. And I posted it on B-Boy World. And Erwin from B-Boy World put it up on the top thread, and he goes, and it was titled, Junior Cujo, watch out for lazy legs.
Let's go.
Nice.
And then like, and it was a top thread for like 3 months.
Let's
and
go.
So like everyone from the scene knew who I was, and then I ended up going to Freestyle Session that summer. And so at Freestyle Session, things ended up kind of like evolving and snowballing, and then I did Red Bull Beat Rider. So that was 2004. But then in 2005, my crutches kept on breaking. Okay. And I found out about a company in Pennsylvania that makes custom crutches for people with disabilities. And they're titanium solid pieces of metal. Wow. And they were guaranteed never to break. So I wrote the guy, but they were like a pair of, it was like, to get a pair was like $2,500. And I wrote the guy, I was like, hey, I can't afford your crutches, but I really would love to try them. Like, would you be open to doing a partnership or like a long-term payment plan or whatever, you know? And he wrote me back within like 2 days, and he goes, and I had put one of my videos, and he goes, wow, I really love what you do. He goes, how about this? I'll give you a pair of crutches for free if you make a video of you dancing in them. So that video that you saw with RJD2 was my like homage to those crutches. Yeah. And I know one of my, I guess, strengths is trying to create multiple opportunities with one opportunity. Yeah. So when I decided to make that video, I wanted to make it a promo video. I didn't want to make it a commercial for the crutches.
Yeah, because I was going to say, this is like the early days of influencing. But like kind of like on
You're
like
the
on the low key.
OG
Like I would have
influencer.
never been able to say it's a commercial. There is one shot of like the crutch, right, in the video, but like
Yeah.
I would have never been able to connect that together.
Yeah.
It's so good.
So I didn't, because like initially I was like, oh cool, maybe I can like wake up in the bed and the crutches come and do like these things. But then I was like, that's corny and it's forced. And I was like, I actually need a new promo video. Let me update it and let me just like do it, you know, and then make sure that it was good quality.
Yeah.
And so, and again, this was when like we still had cassette tapes, you know, like DV8s, you know what I mean?
Let's
like and so I'm filming with my friend Curry, and he was like studying to become like a communications major. So he was studying film and all that, and he offered to do the video for me, and like I'm kind of directing him, but he's kind of directing me. We were just like, yo, let's just go around Montreal and just like kind of freestyle it and do that. I made that video. It did really well. But then there was like a competition from the company LG where they're like, show us your best dance off. And so I submitted that video. And then because of that, that's where it ended up getting snowballing from, because YouTube still wasn't there. You had break.com, you had College Humor, you had that French site.
Still de Ouf, yeah.
Well, Still de Ouf took it, but no, it was like a French, like, it was like a break.com.
Okay.
I forget what it was called. But, and then all of those sites just started taking it. And then YouTube came up like a little later. And that's when things started snowballing. And because of that video and all the attention, I ended up getting like media from all over the world. And within a 2-month period, I had like the Korean media. They flew from Korea. They spent a week with me. They did a documentary on me.
Wow.
I had the Today Show come and they followed me and they did something on me. CBC The National, CBC The Hour with George Stropolakis. So that's where like things started really snowballing for me. And I was recognizing then that, okay, I have the potential to be able to do something with my dance. And I was already getting involved in motivational speaking. And the way that I would get involved in motivational speaking was actually visiting hospitals. And so like for me growing up, I ended up spending a lot of time in hospitals, and just that clown that would come and blow up a balloon to make you laugh for 5 minutes would really change the atmosphere and the environment within the hospital. And so I was like, I want to do that same thing for the kids that are recovering some surgery. So I was going to the Shriners Hospital and the Montreal Children's Hospital, 2004, 2005, 2006, dancing for the kids.
Dope.
And they were giving me like an hour or half an hour time block, and I had no clue how I could do that when my dance was like 30 seconds. But there was a lot of question and answer. And
That's
the
cool.
kids were asking me questions. So I built my speech off of the questions that the kids were asking me, because a lot of the questions were the same questions. And so from that, I ended up learning how to give public speaking. Like I was learning to become a public speaker. And in 2006, I gave my first speech at the Mackay Center. Mackay Center is a specialized school for kids with disabilities. And it's a school that integrates. So like 60% of the kids have disabilities and 40% don't. And the whole idea is to really create an inclusive society within that school. And that was my first speech ever. And the Today Show ended up covering that, and the Montreal Gazette.
Wow.
And because of that, that's when things kind of and just snowballed from there.
Oh my God.
So much press at the same time. Were you nervous at all about that, or you kind of just like you've navigated through that with like?
I'm all, to this day, even being interviewing with you guys, I'm nervous. Honestly, like, but it's good nerves. It's not the nerves where I'm like, I can't do this and I walk away. It's more like, okay, I just want to make sure that I do a good job. You know.
Interesting. Well, I guess a segue to our next topic would be something we wanted to ask you is like, were there any kind of like early inspirations you had, or like people you looked up to in terms of like the dance? Because a big part of your style is like, as you said, upper body strength, but I think that there is a lot of what you do, because we want to talk about your own style as well, but a lot of what you do is, I think, you're twisting moves with your capacities and with your crutches and top rocks like Indian steps and all that stuff. So who were your early inspirations that helped you build those moves, and which move would you say you really which one is your favorite move, I guess, that you switched into, like from a traditional move to your lazy legs move?
You know what? I'm going to be very honest. I was so naive. I didn't really have any influences within the dance. I was influenced by the people that I was around in practices. So when I would watch my friends practice, I would just be like, cool, let me see what you can do, you know? And my UFOs, for example, were really inspired by people doing 6 steps, because they're constantly turning their body. And I had this natural position of just kind of being able to like
push up position.
So I was spinning, but then I was like, let me see if I can try to kick my legs. And that would be like my version of my 6 step. You know what I mean? That was the way that I had interpreted the movements.
Sick.
And then like in terms of like actual influences, like, you know, moving here to Montreal, I was inspired by everyone. So when I saw people just breaking in Montreal, I was just like in love with the way people like interpreted her style. You know, like B-Girl Lynx, like she has this beautiful energy when she's moving, and her presence is just like so strong. And I was like, and she was so nice to me in the beginning. I mean, she still is, like she's my sister. So like, but like, I mean, like, so like I would watch her dance and I would just kind of like dance with her, you know what I mean? Like Dr. Step, I love his presence. Dr. Step and Bambino, those guys, like, you know, they have a presence that I admire. And so I would watch their presence and just their showmanship and just be like, cool, like, you know, like I want to kind of break that down and figure that out. You know, the Decoy, you know, he and I were like, we're brothers. The guy is one of my best friends. But we also had this competitive edge against us because he was doing UFOs. And so anytime he went into the Cypher and do a UFO, I was like, well, fuck that, I can do it too. You know what I mean? And he would do the same thing. Like, so we would go back and forth. And so those guys were my, like, I'd say, like, all my influences. Logo, the guy, I was practicing with him all the time. Like, Tiger, you know, like, everyone in my crew, you know, ILLMATIC, ILLMASK, you know, Red Mask, like, Dingo, like, I loved the way Dingo moves. He has this, like... beautiful, like his lines are perfect when he's moving. So he's like the ballerina b-boy, and I mean that in the
most raw way,
in the most raw way, because he's just like, he has this, like he's so short, but he looks so big when he's dancing. He's so long. You know what I mean?
I think that Chris has an explanation to City. He has an explanation to wearing baggy clothes. He said like it's smoothing the edges, right? And I find that Dingo has nice and sharp lines, but at the same time, when I think about his style, I don't see no edge. Like it's never cutting. It's always just like
the lines.
It's ridiculous. Man.
And but if we're gonna go like, I guess, commercial influences, you know, like people that I've always looked up to or I admired in the dance world, I really like dancers with strong presence.
Right.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, Cloud to me is just like ultimate, you know, just a showman. You know what I mean? Like, so I really appreciate that. I love Dunok. I love his cockiness. You know what I mean? Like K-Meld, his rawness. You know what I mean? Like, so those were dancers that whenever like a video would come out, like I would be like so hyped to watch them, you know? And then when Junior came out, because like at that same time, my video and Junior's video were coming out at the same time, I didn't know who Junior was. And I just felt that I had to have this kind of like competitive edge against him, you know? And so I was training indirectly to battle him, like always, like, so he was kind of my like my motivation to be like, okay, one day I'm gonna battle you. Like I know you're more experienced than me, but I'm gonna get to your level.
Have you battled him?
We ciphered, you know, and actually I got in 2006 or 2007, I had just battled Haute, the one-legged dancer from France. That was my first overseas experience battling. And I had a bad experience with it because I went in with, I had already had the idea of creating ILLABILITIES, and I wanted Haute to be part of the crew. And Yuval is a shit starter, and I get to France, and he's just planting all this negativity, being like, Haute wants to take your name, he hates you, he does this, and this. And I get there, and Haute is kind of avoiding me because he was doing the same thing. Yuval was doing the same thing.
Oh, wow.
And in reality, Haute and I just wanted to get to know each other. We just wanted to like actually be friends, and we're friends now.
Okay, cool.
But the day of the battle, like I'm a peace and love type of guy. You know what I mean? I'm not like, so like, and Oot comes at me and he's like, "Rah!" And I'm just like shitting my pants. And in France, when you're an international dancer, you don't have home team advantage. So the whole crowd was on Oot and they're like chanting his name and all this type of stuff. I go in, it's like crickets, you know, and like I had the crew freak show behind me. They were like, "Lazy, don't worry, we got your back. No one's here supporting us, but we're gonna be here with you." And like they show up behind me and they're like encouraging me. And it was an 8-round battle. And I had planned all my rounds, and in I think the first 2 or 3 rounds, I blanked out, and like and so back to Junior. Sorry, is that like 2 months later, Junior was expected to do a battle, and the other dancer backed out, and Yuval calls me like literally the week before. He's like, "Hey, can you do it?" And I was like, "No," you know, I didn't feel comfortable doing it.
Good,
because I didn't want to put myself in that position where there would be like a negative energy and all that stuff.
I think that's the move
for
sure.
And
you probably don't regret that decision.
No, not at all. And actually, Junior and I are really dope. And he's not in ILLABILITIES, but he's part of our family. Okay. So he's actually battled with ILLABILITIES. Yeah. We contact him for advice from time to time, and like he's actually become like a really good friend of ours. And I feel that if I had gone there, I would have probably had a negative energy against it, and now we're boys. So.
Okay.
That's sick.
Now, again, you're the master of perfect segues. That was great as well. Before we get into ILLABILITIES, no excuse, no limits, all that, just quickly in terms of your style, like, again, you know, we want to know your influences because,
sorry about
you know, you love that's all good. Like, you love to dance, you love to top rock. In terms of technical moves, though, like what would you say? What was your peak time, and what was like the hardest move you could ever do?
So,
if there's such a thing,
I'm 36 years old right now. I know I don't have that same energy, that same strength that I had in my 20s. Do you know what I mean? Like I know, like the idea of like the move, the flying off the crutches. You know, I was actually practicing trying to do a front flip. So there was a period that I would go and I could land on my butt. You know, and I was. You know, I was generally training to be a Red Bull BC1 like b-boy. Do you know what I mean? I had that in my head. And then as Prototype mentioned in his interview, you know, with age, like recovery is so much longer now. Yeah. Like as you get older, and I'm feeling it more and more. I'm also making a living off of my body, so I'm becoming like later on in my 20s, I was recognizing that I can't injure myself, because if I do, then that's like no more paychecks. You know what I mean? And it's not about the money, but it's also about like the time taking it away and all that type of stuff. It was really like I didn't want to affect what I was doing. So I would say that I feel, even though I don't have that same energy, I feel that I'm a more experienced dancer today. That if I'm to battle myself today versus 20-year-old Lazy Legs, I would still win. And I feel, because I've always had problem with rhythm, and like, I mean, I'm not going to deny that, you know what I mean? Like, I've been caught dancing off beat, not purposely, but it's just more like, because I don't know sometimes, you know?
It's all good.
But I'd say that I'm getting more and more comfortable with music. And you were saying like top rock, I love top rock, you know, like, and when I would train with my crew, like I would get told to just do the big tricks, because that was what was going to get us, you know? So I felt like sometimes with the crew, I would get more discouraged from dancing. And now I'm just like, you know what, let me just have fun and let me just like go free. And so I'm having, like, I always had fun dancing, but I'm saying I'm having more fun dancing. I'm having more fun exploring now, because I feel I have more freedom to create movement. So even though, again, I don't have that same energy, I have more creativity to do stuff. So.
This is so cool, because I can really relate to this. Like I'm not your age yet, but I think this should be the target. You know, just like constantly being able to look back and say, I can still smoke me 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even like last week, ultimately, right? Because like I think improving isn't necessarily getting to the Red Bull level, and I'm sure you've realized that very quick. It's just how do you maintain yourself, and are you self-conscious on the steps you need to take to keep your, I guess, your creativity alive or your body in check, you know? So I think this is what you said really resonates. And I guess another question I had regarding that is, like, we know like ILLABILITIES was probably one of your biggest inspiration ever of all time, right? Because like being surrounded by this team of like literally superhumans, like probably changed your life. So how did you connect the pieces, and how things kind of like happened for you guys to form ILLABILITIES?
Yeah, I just want to add something real quick to what you said, like about the constant evolution in dance. Is that like I did a battle in Montreal. It was a 2-on-2 battle, and I think it was the Centipede, the one that Rock's Right was judging.
Yes.
Okay.
I purposely battled by myself, and I battled against Bruce Power and T-Joe, rest in peace.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I did that battle not to win. I did it for myself. And I remember like people were coming up to me like, why would you battle? Like I had Kate and Dr. Cette that were like behind me. They're like, you want me to go in? And I'm like, no. And they were like, well, why? Like you have nothing, like, they're like, why? You have nothing to prove, Lazy. Like, why are you doing this? And I was like, I have to prove it to myself.
Yeah.
That was the whole reason why I did it. And I think that like when we arrive to a certain level, we need to make sure that we can keep ourselves in check. And it's not about being the best dancer, but it's about being the best version of yourself.
Yeah, man.
And that's like something that I appreciate about this dance, is because you can constantly evolve, even though you might be missing out on something else.
I don't know, for you, I find that the only pressure I actually feel is the one that I put myself on, like the one that I like I have myself. I am looking for the word, but like that. It's the pressure that I create on myself, you know, like I'm not pressured by anyone else to dance, but I just want to dance, not because I want to be the best, but just because I love this shit, man. Like I love this dance so much. Like
you were putting expectations on yourself.
That's it. I am putting my own expectations, and no one else is expecting me to do good, right? So it's cool, man. When you realize that ultimately it's you and only yourself. Like no one's like, you could have people behind your back, but it's ultimately it's you, right? So what up?
Yeah, and that's what's beautiful about this dance, is that, and just dance in general, whether you're breaking or not, you know what I mean? That dance really allows you to have that freedom. But we often get caught in that pressure that we put on ourselves, or even just societal pressures in general. You know what I mean? And I think that's something that we need to remind ourselves. And I think especially this year with the pandemic, we've been allowed to have that moment to be able to step back. You know,
totally. And it feels good. Honestly, it feels good, and it feels like the next, I say it a lot, but like the next Cypher in real life, it's gonna be freaking.
it's gonna be fire.
It's gonna be wild.
We're literally gonna burn the floor.
So talk to us a little bit about No Excuses, No Limits, and ILLABILITIES and all that. Like how, like, and I was not aware that you studied marketing and business, so it's kind of makes sense to see how the dots connected, perhaps for you to build this big machine and this big family and this big like structure behind that. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't say I wouldn't say it's a big machine.
No, but it looks like a machine in the sense of like, and I'll clarify. It's well oiled in the sense of like, even just like your podcast, I'm listening to it and it's like seeing all of these like legit like superstars all together, and you had your spot downtown. I don't know if you still have your office downtown, but like you had that spot. When you guys do the anniversary jams and No Limit jams, seeing all of these people coming from all over the world, I'm assuming there's a bunch of funding. I guess you guys even gave like a free flight at the end of your jam last time, like at the last anniversary, like Air Canada was sponsoring. So there is obviously a lot of work that's put behind that, and it is a big machine in that sense. Yes.
I mean, like there's an extraordinary amount of work. And I think that a lot of people don't recognize that in terms of the aspect of things. They just see what they see and they make assumptions and they don't realize.
I think about it. I'm like, because we've organized our jams in the past, and like I know how much work it takes to organize this much of a jam. And whenever I see something you guys put together, I'm like,
it's impressive.
It's impressive. It's very impressive.
I'm fortunate to have. So I think it's. When you say well-oiled machine, I'd say like that I have, my wife, Melissa, and Decoy and Claire and like a couple other like close friends of mine that understand the importance behind what we're doing with ILLABILITIES, that they're like, when we decide to organize a jam, everyone puts all hands on board, and we work together to make something beautiful happen. And I think that the crew more and more now, where in the past they weren't, are getting involved because they recognize it. But just to go into like the segue of the crew, you know, ILLABILITIES. So after I battled Oot, I already had in mind that I wanted to create this crew. And at the time I wanted just to call ourselves Abilities Crew.
Okay.
And I didn't think about it, but then I was like, oh, well, I'm part of ILLMASK. I'm part of ILLMATIC. Like, there's an ill. Why don't we call ourselves ILLABILITIES? And literally, like, fuse everything together.
Yeah.
So, like, we actually used to have T-shirts as a crew where it said ILLMATIC Styles, ILLMASK, ILLABILITIES. That all the guys from ILLABILITIES and ILLMATIC and ILLMASK were all the same family. That was, like, the concept behind it. And I met Oot. I had a bad experience, and I kind of was like, okay, well, I kind of shelved him, you know what I mean? But I was already in contact with Chicho from Chile.
Yeah.
And we were talking via email, and he didn't speak a word of English at the time. He only spoke Spanish. I speak Italian, and I can kind of get my way around Spanish.
Yeah.
But he had a girlfriend at the time who spoke English, and she was like contacting me. I was already friends with Cujo because from the day that I broke my leg, Cujo ended up staying in touch with me because he actually checked in on me after I broke my leg to be like, hope you're doing okay. Like, and then in 2004, I was already in Montreal, and I had gone to Red Bull Beat Riders, and he was a teacher at Red Bull Beat Riders. Then he, like 2 months later, came to Montreal, spent 2 months living in Montreal, working for Cirque du Soleil. And that's where we connected, and I found out he was deaf. And like, I was for 2 months, almost every single night, we were just going around together. I was taking him practices, to jams. He came to Toronto with us when I was part of ILLMATIC, when ILLMATIC won Back to the Underground. So he was with us too on that trip. And so we really vibed really well on that. And so we stayed in touch. And then I met Tommy Guns at the B-Boy Summit, and he had just lost, in 2004, he had just lost his leg to cancer. Okay. He, at the time, was this super skinny kid. He had a shaved head, and I'm at a Cypher in B-Boy Summit, and I see this kid with crutches, and right away, it was like, we're looking at each other, and we didn't see any other dancers with disabilities in 2004. Like, he didn't know any other dancer, I didn't know any other dancer with disabilities, and we're looking at each other, and it was like that, wow, wow, wow. You know what I mean? Yeah. And we just ciphered, and we became really good friends at that moment, and we changed our contact. And in 2006, before officially starting ILLABILITIES, the Red Bull BC One was happening in Brazil, and I knew that Junior was going, and I also wanted Junior to be a part of the crew. And I was connected with Red Bull indirectly because of the Red Bull Beat Riders, so they would have special events in Montreal. They would hire me to come and just do a throwdown, or like whenever they had like a club opening, I would be part of that like family. Right. So I was in touch with them, like, can you bring us to Brazil? I want to do a 4-corner battle between myself, Chicho, Cujo, and Junior. And that was actually like getting organized. And it was like almost going to happen. And then something happened where someone from, I think, Red Bull South America decided not to make it happen. And so myself and Cujo didn't end up going. But Junior and Chicho went, and they actually battled. And they had like a friendly Cypher battle. And that video ended up blowing up on like the breaking community and all that stuff. And that got me to really like be like, cool, like Chicho's with it. You know, like Junior at the time was blowing up so big that he kind of didn't have any interest. And so when I contacted Cujo, Chicho, and Tommy Guns, I was like, hey guys, I have this idea to start this crew. Do you guys want to be a part of it? Everyone was cool with it. Then summer of 2007, myself, Tommy, and Cujo got invited to Red Bull BC One at the LA qualifier. Okay. And this, they had just tried to do qualifiers in certain countries. And so they felt bad that they couldn't bring us to Brazil. So they're like, well, second best thing, come to LA. And we're like, okay, cool. So we made it a trip. We all went to LA. We opened for the Red Bull BC One qualifier that day. And that was like the first public, I would say was the soft launch of ILLABILITIES because Chicho wasn't there. And then later that year, I got invited to go to France to judge a battle or to do a showcase. And I told the organizer, instead of paying me, I want you to fly out Chicho. And I want to get to meet Chicho because I hadn't met him.
Dope.
And so the organizer decided, he's like, great, I get 2 dancers for, like he took advantage of that. But Chicho and I met, and he didn't speak a word of English, didn't speak French. I'm speaking Italian to him. He's speaking to me Spanish. And within that week, we connected and we became like really, really close.
Wow.
And we became really good friends. And the following year in 2008, I organized the first No Limits event. Yeah. And that was at the Just for Laughs museum. Yeah. And I don't know if this person's name came up at all in terms of history, but Constance, who used to organize the Just for Laughs, she had a thing against me. Okay. Anytime I wanted to do an event. So when I did the City versus City event, she was talking to Asian and City and being like, Lazy Legs is a horrible leader, don't follow him. And so they were actually considering not doing the City versus City thing because Constance was like really like manipulating them in terms of, I don't know, she was just against it. She thought that she should have been the one that created the crew, or she didn't like, anyways, that's another story. But then I do the event, and I was dealing, when I rented the venue, with someone that had no affiliation to besides just managing the venue. The day of the event, I get a phone call from the manager, or it was the day before the event. I get a phone call from the manager being like, hi, Luca, I'm sorry, we can't organize your event. I'm like, what? I was like, I already have the guys here. Like, it's been committed. You have to come. You have to allow us. And he's like, no, but do you know this person named Constance? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, yeah. So she's saying that you can't organize a Just for Laughs event a month before her event because it's connected to like Just for Laughs, and they're going to think that it has something to do with the same event. And then they ended up pulling up this bullshit story that my insurance didn't clear, and that we were doing a hip hop event, and that hip hop was not being insurable and all that stuff, which I'm sure any organizer has
we've heard that before.
And I called the guy from Red Bull because I was getting a sponsorship from Red Bull to help. They were giving us like $500 to help just with like the prize. And I was like, can you guys do something? And he's like, made a phone call, and then he calls back. He's like, don't worry, it's taken care of.
Sick.
And we organized the event. That was the first like official debut of ILLABILITIES, because it was the first time that myself, Cujo, Tommy, and Chicho were in the building at that same time. Okay. And then from 2008 to 2010, 2011, we were having random opportunities. That same summer, like really randomly before ILLABILITIES was known, myself and Tommy got invited to do a Japanese TV show, but separately. And then like we were talking about this email, and they're like, "Oh, why don't we just put it together?" So we sold the aspect of going to having ILLABILITIES perform, and so we ended up opening for like Japanese biggest boy band called Arashi.
Amazing.
And that was our first international trip as ILLABILITIES.
That's awesome.
And it was just like a crazy experience, and like it was one of those things too where like we went to Tokyo, and they just like really like they wine and dined us like the whole time, and it was like really, really sick, Nice. And then from there, like this bond was created with the crew, and we became really, really tight. But we would only come together when opportunities came. Yeah. And so from 2008 to 2010, there wasn't much going on. And in 2011, I had already graduated university, and I had already done the Vancouver Paralympic Games. Because after I graduated university, I was like, cool, I want to do something for ILLABILITIES. But my focus was on the Paralympics, so I kind of like shelved ILLABILITIES for a bit. And then Cujo had met a guy named Redo. Yeah. Yeah. And we had an opportunity to go to Sweden to do a little showcase. And I had a family emergency and I couldn't go. And so Redo actually was at that event to meet Cujo and Tommy, just to meet, because he wanted to join the crew. And Cujo and Tommy were like, hey, Lazy's not here. Do you want to take his spot? And so like 12 hours before getting on stage, like Redo, like, because the show that we had voiceovers. So it's like we're interpreting movement through our voices and all that stuff. Like Redo runs, like they lock themselves in a bathroom, they use their iPhones, and they're just recording their Redo's voice.
That's hilarious.
And they put it over my track, you know? So
Amazing.
they take out my voice and they put Redo's track. And Redo just loved the experience being part of the crew and the response. And he recognized that the importance of what we were doing goes beyond just dance.
Yeah.
And so the following day, I call Redo up and I say, welcome to the crew. And I sent him a t-shirt. Like,
Nice.
I didn't even know him. Like, I hadn't met him. And that same organizer in France that flew out Chicho a couple years earlier flew me out again. And I said, again, instead of paying me, bring Redo, but from Holland, I want you to take him to Montreal. Because I didn't want to like deal with the money or anything like that. So I was just like, you handle the flights. And so summer of 2011, it was May 2011, I told all the guys, I was like, hey guys, I'm ready to really like commit to ILLABILITIES. So we rented a loft in Montreal. It was on Avenue des Pins. It actually, we found out later that Cleopatra, like that Emmanuel and Ilan were living in that space, like just above us. And we rented it. It was like a 1,200 square foot, just open space. And at the time we had no sponsorships, no government support, no nothing. But I was already getting really involved in motivational speaking. And so I had contacted every single school I had ever performed at. And I said, I have this opportunity to bring ILLABILITIES for this month. Do you want to book us? I booked 28 school shows within 30 days. Wow. It was across Montreal, Quebec City, Toronto, and Ottawa, and New York City. And then I had gotten in touch with all those cities and with the B-boys in those cities, and I asked them to organize qualifiers so that way we can create like a final grand finale event at Club Soda. And we did No Limits 2 at Club Soda. And it was like the official debut where people got to know who Redo was. And so we basically took a theater show that we built back in 2009 and just expanded it with Redo and Chicho. And in the mornings, in those 30 days, we were performing in the schools, and at night, in that loft, we were building the theater show.
Okay.
And Decoy was part of our crew too. So Mark Benny Lava, and he still is part of our crew. He's still part of our family, but he's more like less active in the aspect of the crew and everything. But we built a show called No Limits. It was a theater show, 20-minute piece, that later on got picked up by Breaking Convention in the UK. And then Breaking Convention decided to tour it. And so they took us to the UK. Dope. We ended up getting nominated for an Olivier Award, which is like the equivalent of Les Gémeaux. And then basically from there, that's when things really blew up for us internationally.
Dope.
What a lot of people don't know was that from like 2007 to 2014, I was like the manager leader of ILLABILITIES and like really organizing all the contracts. And in 2014, on our last Breaking Convention tour, I helped organize 22 cities in 6 weeks. And it was like the biggest tour we had ever done. And I really started feeling a resentment with the crew because I felt that we weren't, our crew, like you said, like we're a group of like superhumans and stuff. And I think it was getting to our head. And we weren't trying to improve. We were just allowing, like, just to be able to get by. And, you know, we had opportunities to go to practice and practice with dope B-boys. You know, we ended up touring with, like, the Bird Gang crew from the UK, and they're, like, world-renowned, like, theater dancers with, like, but, like, Sonny was part of it from, you know, like, a lot of dope B-boys, you know, that were a part of it. And, like, we didn't really take advantage of just being and vibing with them and trying to expand, you know. And that same time, I was also building Projet Rad, which was like our dance program. And I was really committed to that. And I also gave myself a challenge to walk 2.5 kilometers that whole time, during that whole period. And so I just came off that tour.
Wow.
I'm like really committed to Projet Rad. I organized my 2.5K. And then my body actually didn't react well to the walk. So like a lot of people don't know this, but I actually, sorry, I'm skipping steps. On that tour in the UK, I told the guys I'm taking a step down as the manager leader of the crew. I was like, I'm still part of the crew, but whenever opportunity comes, like, because we had a website and we would just get emails every so often, I'll just forward it, and whoever wants to handle it, if you want to include me. If not, whatever. Like, I was really kind of in that whatever mode, you know? And then I do my walk, and my body doesn't react well to it. And for like a month, I'm like in really bad shape. I can barely move. Like I become super stiff, and I kind of like, I have this like resentment against ILLABILITIES. I have a resentment against dance. But then like Projet Rad is blowing up, and I'm getting all these opportunities to really promote Projet Rad. And I end up forcing myself to put myself out there for Projet Rad. But internally I hadn't healed, and I was hating everything that I was doing.
Yeah.
So for 3 years, like, again, a lot of people don't know this, but I was depressed. Like I went through like a burnout and a depression that, although I was in the public's eye, and it looked like I was successful. So you said like I had my office downtown and all that type of stuff. Like things were happening, but they weren't from the heart. There was, it was kind of, it was being forced, you know?
Yeah.
And for the crew, ILLABILITIES, we were still doing stuff, but there was no movement in trying to improve what we were doing. And so we would just get opportunities just because people wanted inclusive events, because people wanted like to include people with disabilities. So we were getting away with doing performances and like teaching workshops. And what we were doing was special, and I'm not taking anything away, but it wasn't fun. And even within those 3 years, you know, within the crew, the vibe, we weren't liking who we were. Like we weren't liking being together.
Yeah.
We were having fun, but it almost felt like a job. It didn't feel like a family anymore. And then in 2017, like Redo recognized that I was going through this like really deep depression, because my daughter Aura was born in 2015 at the same time as all of this was happening. And I was trying to juggle being a parent and still trying to juggle my career as LAZY LEGZ and ILLABILITIES and Projet Rad, still trying to figure stuff out. And like Redo actually flew himself to Montreal in 2017, and he spent 2 weeks living with me, and we just practiced and we just got down. And we decided to drive to Boston to like a random like local jam. No one knew we were coming. We weren't there to promote ILLABILITIES. It was kind of like we just wanted to go there and prove ourselves.
Yeah.
And it was the first time that I battled for myself and not for like to show off or whatever. It was really just like, it was that battle within me.
Yeah.
And we made it top 4 off like 90 B-boys.
Wow.
And like, it was fun. It was just like, whoa. And like Redo reminded me, he's like, yo, ILLABILITIES, you created it. He's like, take that control. Like, don't let the resentment like get to you. And so like after he came, I called all the guys from the crew and I said, hey guys, I'm going to take control of the crew again, and I'm going to like help bring us to that next level. Well, at that same time, we recruited Crops from South Korea.
Yeah.
Samuka and Perninha in Brazil. They were like young blood. They gave us new energy, you know, like
Nice.
That summer we called Samuka and we're like, yo, we want to do freestyle session. Do you want to come? And he's like, yeah. And like, we had never met Samuka before. Like we were talking online and all that stuff, but we had never met him, you know? And it was kind of like a total trust type of thing. You know, I had a lot of air miles just from like that I racked up. So I paid for his flight through my air miles. And we show up, meet in Los Angeles, November 2017. And within 10 minutes, it was as if he was part of the crew from the beginning.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And like, he didn't speak English. And like, we're just like we say we could talk Portuñol. Like now with Chicho, because Chicho and I have figured out a way to talk. So I actually speak Spanish.
Yeah.
And so I mix my Spanish with Portuguese words here and there.
You guys mastered the language of Latin.
Yeah.
Just like.
So we figured out a way to communicate. And Perninha couldn't come to freestyle session, but he was with us in spirit. And like Perninha and Samuka were best friends. So we're like, cool, we've got this like connection now. And then I had an opportunity to bring the guys to the country of Georgia, so like near Russia. And we're like, hey, Perninha, do you want to come? And this was his first time like traveling so far, you know, and he comes, same type of thing, never met him. Within 10 minutes, like we're sharing stories from the past as if he is like, yo, you remember that?
Yeah.
And it's as if he was always there and everything. And so since then, we've really transformed the crew. We created a brand new theater show. We've made an effort to really focus on the battle, like that we are battle B-boys, but we're also b-boys that have an important message, that we go beyond just the battle, that it's through motivational speaking, that's through teaching workshops, and it's really like bringing people together. Yeah. And I feel that since 2017 to now, we've toured, I think it was like 17 different countries, and our bond is stronger than it ever was. Awesome. And even right now, with the pandemic happening, once a week we do like weekly sessions where we just kind of catch up and share, practice, show off moves. And then now we started doing these podcasts. And even though I've known some of the stories that guys have shared, I guess rehearing them and through the podcast aspect of things, it's like completely different. And I know that the minute that I see the guys, once we have that opportunity, it'll be as if we were just seeing each other 1 month ago. Yeah. So
wow. Okay. This is a lot. And unfortunately we're closing off. We're closing off to our last minutes. But
it's already
You're
an amazing storyteller.
Dude, because like I'm checking off like the list, and I'm like,
I just threw the paper in the air. And
I legit, we could have thrown this back and never looked at it, and you kind of like checked all of the boxes. Of course, I think we could have deep dived into like JC Styles and Projet Rad a little bit, but perhaps that's
for another
time.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're so generous, my friend. You're very generous of your time, of your knowledge, of your stories. I feel like there's so much that we've unpacked in that last hour and 45 minutes.
Yeah. Wow, it's already been an hour and 45 minutes. I'm so sorry.
No. It's cool. It's just unfortunate we have to wrap up. But before we let you go, we have to run you through the rapid fire questions.
Oh, shit.
I'm sure you've heard these before. So Emil and I, we're gonna try and like bounce them off one by one. So favorite MC or hip hop group?
I'm definitely a headphone hip hop guy, so like Talib Kweli, like Common, De La Soul, those guys.
Nice.
Okay. Let's go. And is there an artist you've been listening to like recently? It could be of any genre really that you've been vibing to lately.
So there's two artists right now. So I'm getting more involved in contemporary, like and more modern and stuff like
Something
that.
Something we can talk about, perhaps.
But so there's this piano artist named Sofiane Paramat. Like just anytime I hear one of his songs, I'm just like, yo, this is amazing. Like, and it just gets me to move differently. And then in terms of hip hop, there's a MC named Russ and Absol. Like, anytime, I feel that he's today's generation of what late 90s 2000 hip hop, New York hip hop was. You know what I mean? Like he's bringing in today's flavor but has that rawness.
Sick. So. A matchup you'd love to see or someone you would love to battle yourself?
Man, you know, like if you asked me maybe like 2 years ago, I would have had the answers for you, but back in the day, I would have always loved to see Domkey versus Pieces. Like those were like two stackers, you know. Like,
man.
So, and then in terms of me battling, I mean, I think I anyone. Like honestly, like I'll battle the world. You know what I mean?
Go.
Like,
I don't know if you know. I mean, we haven't had much battles going on because of COVID right now, but. Do you have an underdog of the scene right now in Montreal? Anybody that comes to mind that's an underdog?
You know what? I got to be very honest. I'd say that in the past 2 years, I've been less and less affiliated with the scene. But I do know that like Chris and the Break City guys, like they have some students. I'm trying to think the names of the crew, but like the guys, the New Expo guys, but also I think Time Machine. Yeah. The two guys from Time Machine. There's one guy who was like a little flail, like
Quake.
You know, Quake. Yeah, sorry, I keep on my bad. Quake, whatever. But like Quake and the Trip. Yeah, like those guys. I'm sorry.
It's all good.
But and I know Seventh Floors has been repping really well, and I think that they're kind of the hungry. Like they make me think of the 701 Area 51. Like you know, like that eager. Almost cocky, but yet like also respectful. Like you know, they so I respected them too. But to be honest, I haven't been so in the scene. You
named the ones that are typically named.
Pretty
So
much.
this is
Well, I think the last time we actually battled in a crew battle, remember Hip Hop You Don't Stop last year?
Yeah.
And that was those dudes, you know? So
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
you were in there in the know-how of the scene.
Well, there's also, you know what? There's Kate's student too. That is
Ace?
Shadow.
Oh, okay, Shadow?
Shadow Kid too. Like he has something special too. Like
Nice.
yeah.
sick.
Cool.
Favorite jam ever of all time, and maybe one in Montreal as well.
So ever of all time. So I would say that Freestyle Session 2004 was epic because I saved up. Like I worked at Beaver Tails all summer long just for that plane ticket to go, and it was like my first experience in LA. And it was the time that Freestyle Session got shut down. So we're waiting in line. We have no clue what's going on. Everything gets moved to the Queen Mary like a ship. I'm like, and then we kind of like get led over to this one like hotel like cruise ship. I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever, you know. And I think that whole experience, because I was only going to go to Freestyle Session, but then I linked up with Pieces. Pieces and I became really close, and he's one of my best friends also. And he's like, yo, we're going to B-Boy Summit. And I actually ended up extending my flight to go to B-Boy Summit, and I stayed with him.
Wow.
And so that whole trip to me was a memorable trip.
Sick.
So Freestyle Session, B-Boy Summit,
Let's go.
2004.
Nice.
And Montreal?
Montreal, besides No Limits. No, I'm joking. No, you know what? The old War is War.
Yeah.
You know what? There was something so special with the War is War. The ones that were at the LAZY,
Yeah.
there was that was like raw. You know, those were raw jams, and they were like showcase jams, but raw at that same time.
Nice.
There was something really special about that.
Sick.
Yeah.
Favorite kicks for breaking?
Anything that's very light. I need light shoes. Right now, I'm dancing with Adidas Cloud Foams,
Okay, nice.
and I really like them because I feel like I'm wearing socks.
Nice.
Basically, like, did you have a b-boy that you were afraid or somebody was intimidating to battle in your beginnings?
Well, I'd say more recently, ILLABILITIES, we did a battle in Italy, and we ended up in the finals against Hustle Kids.
Okay.
And that whole event, we were killing it. And against them, I ended up freezing. And like Menno, like I know Menno, like we're chill, but when he battles, he just
He's a
you know
monster.
Gets at you,
he's a
yeah.
monster. And he got in my head, and I just froze, and it was like the shittiest round I ever did. You know what I mean? And I'm like, wow, why are we in the finals? You know what I mean? Like after watching that round. But yeah, I'd say that was one of my moments of fear.
Dope.
I'd say.
What's a power move you wish you could do?
A power move. I mean, obviously, like air flares and 90s. You know, like
Yeah.
I didn't really get involved in this, but I can't extend my arms straight. That's part of my condition. So that's why I don't
Okay.
do handstands. I feel that if I could do a straight handstand, like a legit one, I would be able to have those 90s. I'd be
Yeah.
able to have those 2000s.
You do you do windmills, like you do kind of like a variation of a windmill, and I guess a shoulder spin. Like, is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean I do that, but I don't have that reach to be able to like
Right.
do
Right.
that blow up or whatever. You know what I mean? Even just to do a rollback, for example, I land in a chair freeze. I can't
Got it.
pull up because I can't lift my arm more than
Okay.
this, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Okay. Just in general, West Coast or East Coast?
I've been preparing for this question, and now that you asked me, I don't know.
You sound prepared.
Both have their beauties. You know what I mean? Like I think that like the West Coast has the weather and like this like feel of freedom, but then the East Coast has this hustle that
The grind,
the
yeah.
grind that so I can't choose. You know, like I had the option to move to Vancouver after the Paralympics. Well, option like it was between Melissa and I. We talked about it seriously, and we were looking into moving in. And there's something so special about Montreal that I don't think we could leave. You know what I mean?
We'll take East Coast as an answer.
Yeah, so East Coast. Sorry, East Coast.
Tupac or Biggie?
That too, man. They're both legends in their own right. You know what I mean? Like I think.
You're just too nice. You can pick either.
You know what though?
It's a life or death decision. Man.
You know, it's like when they ask you if you want soup or salad. I don't know, man. I just don't know.
Can I have both?
No, exactly. You have and have. Put this one out. No, no. But honestly, because I appreciate both artists in completely different for different reasons. You know what I mean? Like, but like if we're talking about skill and talent, like I think that the rawness of Biggie. Like, you know, that if we're talking about strictly that, there's something like the musicality of things, but then there's also the movement activism of Tupac. So,
Yeah,
like, you know what I mean? So,
All right.
sorry, guys.
All right. We won't make you.
Okay, so you're gonna have to answer these next two. So, okay, this one: Ken Swift or Maurizio?
I have stories about both of those guys. So Ken Swift, a Rebel beat writers, was chilling with us, and he decided to stay the whole week because he just wanted to vibe. And one night he decided to come into our room and just drink with us.
Okay.
And like we just partied with him.
Nice.
And he looks at me, he goes, "Luca, I'm the richest b-boy in the world." And I'm like, "What do you mean by that?" He goes, "I'm poor as fuck, but I'm loved by everyone." And that made me realize that like the beauty about life and society is not about like money and wealth and all that type of stuff. It's really about energy. And Ken Swift has this really amazing, beautiful energy that is super likable. Maurizio too, I got to judge a battle with him in Italy. And he's just, being Italian, I have that pride of Italy. So I'm going to go with Maurizio for this one. Okay, if you make me choose.
All right. Premiere or the RZA?
Premiere.
Let's go.
All right, last question. You can stop sweating. Would you? Is there someone you can think of that we could have as a guest here on our podcast?
I have a lot of people. Yeah.
Someone we haven't had yet.
Well, Skywalker, obviously. Like, I mean, I think that's like historically, you know, he helped develop a lot. I don't know. I mean, like, I think crypto is interesting. Like, I think you guys should reach out to him and stuff like that. And you know, Afternoon too. He's got his history. Like, I know everyone has their opinions and all that type of stuff, but I think that all three of them have.
Afternoon was actually an early guest.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, it's
seventh
or eighth
episode.
So it's,
my bad.
It's already
Okay.
a year ago. It's all good, man.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. So I
But
think
he had a good episode. If you want to check it out. Yeah.
And then there's I was gonna say, like, historically, if you want to reach someone who's not a b-boy but has a lot of history on the old, Angelo from Off the Hook.
Oh,
Because he used to host the call-out sessions.
yeah, that's true. That's true.
And so he might have some like either footage or history
Interesting.
about like the breaking scene and like the connection between Under Pressure and Off the Hook and all that type of stuff.
Interesting.
So.
Nice. Before we let you go, any shout outs, anything you want to plug? Where can people follow you? I know you have your podcast. Maybe you want to plug that.
I mean, first off, shout out to all my crews.
Let's go.
ILLMATIC, ILLMASK, ILLABILITIES. Shout out to Montreal. Honestly, Montreal is the best place in the world. I wouldn't move anywhere. And Canada in general, we have so much richness with our skill and our talent. So I'm proud of every single one of you. And I've got, we're launching, we've been promoting our podcast. It's the No Limits podcast. It's actually inspired by you guys. So, so we interview each of the members of the crew, and then actually we've been recording other episodes with multiple members of the crew where we just talk about different topics. Like about like it's really more positive aspects of things. So like self-acceptance. When have we used the No Excuses, No Limits message? What is an embarrassing moment? What did we learn about it? You know, like those types of stories, and we get to share in depth about that. And then other things that I'm working on. Actually, people don't know that this either, but I have been getting involved in more like different styles of dance, and I actually created a tap dance project. So I put washers on the bottom of my crutches, and I have a little tap dance routine. So in the next couple of months, I'll be releasing some of that stuff. And if people want to follow me, you can just type in @bboy lazy legs. Legs is spelled with a Z at the end, so LAZYLEGZ. On Insta, Twitter, and Facebook. So,
it's a shame we need to wrap this up.
I know, man.
I'm so I feel full. I feel energized from this conversation. I want to take on the world.
And I want more from Lazy Legs.
But I want more from Lazy Legs. But thank you so much, dude.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you guys so much. Man. Keep on doing. You guys have my full support all the time. You, and much respect, honestly.
Lazy Legs,
let's go.
Yeah, man.
Nice.
Cool. Thank you, guys.